Hi, welcome today. I am really happy to have Hannah Kadron. I remember her as Fry when she was here. She is an alum of Maryville College from 2014. When she got her BA in mathematics. At the time we did not have a BS. Now we have a BS. She had her BA in mathematics. She was summa cum laude. She also spent a summer at Oak Ridge National Lab working in the computing, supercomputer kind of things. So I'm not going to tell you a whole lot about her path after Maryville College because that's her job, but please welcome her back to Maryville College.
Thanks, everyone. Like she said, I'm Hannah Kadron. So I'm mostly going to be talking to you about kind of my career in the space I work in, which is data governance, which 2 years ago, I didn't even know what data governance was. I didn't know it existed. So just kind of a forewarning, I'm not at all an expert in it, but give you kind of a quick overview. So just kind of my career journey. So like she said, I graduated in 2014, but prior to that, I had an internship at Oak Ridge National Lab. That was kind of an interesting internship. So I kind of got it haphazardly. I had applied for it, but didn't hear anything back. I ended up hosting a student at Vanderbilt College for an overnight stay for them to see if they wanted to come here. And she ended up like leaving a t-shirt or something overnight. So I had emailed her parents saying, hey, she left this shirt. And then when they replied back, they saw that I was a dog sitter because I had that at the bottom of my email. And they're like, hey, do you want to dog sit for us? My husband who works for Oak Ridge National Lab is doing XYZ, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, he works at Oak Ridge. I applied for an internship and I haven't heard back. And she actually got me connected with somebody who ended up being my mentor at that internship. So kind of what I tell you about that is don't just blanket apply to things. Show some initiative sometimes because you'll get in doors just by making connections with people in really haphazard ways. So that internship was really fun because as a math major, they didn't really know what to do with me because everyone seems to get confused of what math majors do. So they stuck me in the climate science division and they were like, you know stuff about climate change, right? And I was like, no. They were like, you know how to program in Python, right? No. They said, you know how to use a Linux computer, right? No. So that night I just kind of jumped online and taught myself the very rough basics of Python. My mentor walked me through the Linux computer the next day. So that was a really cool experience of just getting like thrown in the deep end and being like, hey, learn something new. And they were really pleasantly surprised with how well I did. So again, as a STEM major, as math major for me, that was a great experience to show like my degree in the workforce and being applied in something that wasn't necessarily a direct correlation, but something that showed that I knew how to learn. So as you're selling yourself to future employers, like definitely explain your degree is super flexible and you can learn a lot of things. So I graduated in 2014. I started working at 21st Mortgage. I'm sure a lot of you have heard things about them. So I actually did not want to go work for them initially. I applied to a ton of different places, but to me, as a grad, I thought it was kind of that safe choice. But I am very happy I ended up landing there because that is what opened up the doors for me for the mortgage industry, which is where I'm still working today. Had I not gotten that experience at 21st Mortgage, I would not be in the career I am today. So initially it was like, I don't want to do collections. You know, I did not want to take that job. I was like, I'm a math major. I should not have to do collections. But the experience I got in that role is helping me today. As I work on the data side of things, now I know, hey, this is what the person in that role is dealing with. I know why they're entering bad data. I know why they're doing this because I was in that position before. So that's kind of my advice to you guys is don't be afraid to take that first job out of college because you never know what doors might open from there. So I worked in collections. I moved pretty quickly up because I'm a very efficient person. And so they were like, hey, they kept promoting me I worked in customer service. That gave me an even bigger lens of the mortgage industry. I basically saw the whole picture from the initial application all the way down to a loan being paid off. And again, that gave me the holistic view that I'm still using in my job now. Then from there, I moved on to Brunswick Boat Group. So that's where I was like, okay, I really want to get back to my math roots a little bit more. I want to start doing some analysis, stuff like that. So I was a domestic credit specialist and then ended up switching into international. So I was working with people across the world. I worked with France, Germany, all kinds of different places. And I realized I am really bad at hearing people on the phone with a different accent. That is not my strength at all. But again, that was a really cool challenge for me of getting to work with different nationalities, learning different time zones, working periods. So that was really cool experience. And I got more of a piece into finance and accounting because I never really had that experience before. From there, I then made the shift into a auditor for Vanderbilt mortgage. So I went back to the Clayton family of companies. And again, I really liked that role. That was really where I got to shine as like a data person because I got to see everything wrong. You know, people always rag on auditors because they are the bad guys. But to me, it was a challenge. It was like, if I don't find any errors, like I'm not doing my job. So that was a really cool challenge for me of finding opportunities where other people might not realize there are ones. And through that, that's where I got a lot of Excel experience. So again, prior, I didn't have any Excel experience. People just assumed that as a math major, I had it. I did not. I was the type, I picked up skills as I needed them. So until I needed it, I didn't really do a lot with Excel. Not saying you shouldn't. If you have the time, learn skills. But for me, I just hadn't had an opportunity to learn it. So that's when I got really heavy into Excel. And I would say that opened up a lot of doors in the business world too, is as you get experience in different softwares and stuff like that, that'll make a lot more job opportunities open up for you. So then I went from audit and I actually got reached out by an internal recruiter saying, hey, are you interested in data governance? And I was like, what is data governance? And so she kind of explained to me that, hey, they just started this new team. It's been around for about a year. They work on improving data quality of the company, but she didn't even really know what it was. And I said, well, that's interesting because me as an auditor, I've been complaining about our data quality. I'm trying to use this data and run this analysis on it, but I'm constantly having to fix the data. So for instance, somebody's birthday is in the 1900s. I don't think a current customer was born in the 1900s. So I would have to fix that as an auditor. So I would spend hours and hours on analysis trying to clean up our data that I couldn't actually do my auditing job. So it was really cool when that recruiter reached out to me and I was like, this is what I've been complaining about. And she's like, well, funny story, we have this team for that. So I got hired into that role and we were a very new team. Like, again, nobody in the company really knew we existed. Nobody knew what we did. So a lot of our initial beginning stages was just explaining to other departments what we did. So I will touch on what data governance is as we go through. But then from there, I moved to Freedom Mortgage. One of the biggest reasons I moved was I wanted to be remote and I wanted to make more money, point blank. So I will say you don't always have to have a super concrete reason for leaving a company. Don't be afraid to leave a company. Obviously, don't burn bridges when you leave a company because as you see, I left 21st, but I came back to Clayton. So if I had burned a bridge at 21st, I could have never been hired back at Clayton then. So always leave doors open, but if a company's not giving you what you need, don't be afraid to leave. Like you're not obligated to stay. So I'm currently at Freedom. I've been there for just over a year. I got promoted within about 6 months to senior data quality analyst. It's basically our team lead for our group. But yeah, so that is my career journey. So a little bit about data governance. So again, like I said, a lot of people don't even know it exists. So I kind of like to explain it's a really growing field. So, for instance, for me, I'm always looking at career opportunities. Is the career I'm jumping into actually a career that has growth? Or if I take this position, will I basically be capped out and stuck in this position for the next 20, 30 years? So for me, data governance is really new. Nobody really has experience in it. There aren't really degrees yet offered in it. So for me, as somebody with really about 4 years experience in the field, I get over 100 messages on LinkedIn since the start of January. So about 2.5 messages a week. And since I made this slide on Wednesday, I think I've gotten 10 more messages. So I can't even keep that number up to date. So I don't have a robust experience in this field. I know very little, but I'm still getting recruiters knocking down my door trying to hire me. So I say that to say, if you get in the data space, getting into data governance, you will have a lot of doors open if it's at all interesting to you. And then also cool fun fact, Business Wire mentioned that data intelligence and governance was valued at $20.5 billion in 2021 and is supposed to increase to about $36 billion by 2026. So again, it's a very growing industry. Salaries. So again, everybody wants to know, what can you make in this kind of career? Is this something that I could actually make a living in? I know as a student, and then when I was graduating, that was a big concern of mine. Was I wanted to make sure I got into a career that, again, had growing salaries and salaries that I could actually live off of. So just as a quick glance through a couple different websites, the average is about 100K, give or take. And that's with about 2 to 4 years experience. So again, there's a lot of other industries. You need 10 plus years experience to even touch that number. Cool thing is you can really start off pretty high up with very little experience in this industry. And then there's a lot of other positions that kind of grow from the initial analyst position. There's senior data governance, there's data governance managers, there's managers that are over data governance, data strategy, data privacy. There's so many different wings that all relate to data governance that once you get that data governance experience, you could really jump a lot of different places too. So again, kind of rough range, about 100K, but it can be upwards of 250 plus too, depending on positions. So the other question I always had was, what kind of skills do I need for this? So this again is kind of an ever evolving list because nobody really knows yet. Data governance is changing every single day, so the skills needed change every single day. But I think the core proponents are hard and soft skills. So again, as a Maryville College grad, this was really neat because I had that liberal arts background. I had to do presentations. I knew how to write a paper. I knew how to talk to business leaders. But then I also knew how to do the analysis side of things. I knew how to talk to somebody who was a database engineer and all they knew was the numbers. And I knew how to translate that information over to the user that's like, what's math? I don't know what math is. And I get to be that cool in-between person that lives between those two worlds. So the biggest thing I would say is if you're at all interested in this area is if you're weak on one of those sides, is just starting to develop those skills. Because I was not at all a speaker prior. When I came to Maryville, I could not even make a phone call to order a pizza. I was that terrified of a phone. My mom would stand there looking at me like, why can't you make this phone call? And I would just start bursting in tears and running out of the room. So you can learn those skill sets, especially if you're a STEM major and you're kind of naturally on that analysis side of things. It's really easy to learn those soft skills, and you're getting that at Maryville College. So kind of some specific hard skills, SQL or SQL, some people call it. That's a really big database querying language right now, popular in the business world. Excel, like I mentioned, a lot of companies are trying to get off of Excel, so SQL is kind of more robust of that. Any kind of querying databases is a good thing for you to know, and just general structure. So I'm not at all a database engineer, but I know the rough structure of how a table is formed in a database. I know what a column is. I know what a row is. And those various different things really helps me to talk to those very technical people. And then, like I said, those soft skills, the adaptability. So I mentioned data governance is really ever evolving, that people are figuring out what it is. So we have to stay super flexible in our career, because what we're doing this week is totally different from what we're going to be doing 6 weeks from now. So data governance really provides a lot of value. A lot of companies are just collecting a bunch of data. And they've collected data and just kind of parked it there, and they're like, what do we do with this? And they're trying to start to analyze the data, but they don't really know how, or they just have a bunch of it and they don't know where to begin. So really, data governance helps come in and works with the business analysts to find the data that they want, and then access that data. So data privacy is a big piece of data governance. Being able to understand and trust that data in order to make impactful business decisions. We also help improve customer experience. So this is something that a lot of companies are really focused on right now, because how you relate to your customer impacts your future business. So we really help make our data better, which increases the speed that our customers have when they're filling out, say, a loan application. Or it makes it more convenient for them because we maybe auto-populate some of the data for them. And it makes it more consistent. The process is the same regardless of the customer we're working with. We also help reduce the cost of data storage. So again, data is not free. It takes a lot of resources and money to store data. So if you have a customer name stored in your system 5,000 times, that's costing the company money every time you store that piece of data. So we help reduce that down, make sure there's one central place, and then get rid of all those duplicates, because you're just wasting a bunch of storage space for the company. And then we also help emphasize compliance and security. So working in the mortgage industry, compliance is a huge topic. That is what mortgage companies really are most focused on, because they can get a lot of fines if they're not compliant. Regulators want to catch these companies doing something wrong. And it's not even doing something wrong on purpose, but if you're not following these regulations, you can get millions and millions of dollars of fines just because you accidentally mistyped somebody's birth date in a system. So it's very simple, minor mistakes these companies sometimes are making. It's not usually on purpose. It's just somebody typing on a computer too fast. But that mistake can cost companies hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, and it could mean them staying open or not. So we help reduce that cost for them. And then we also increase being able to make more actions off of the data. So again, if you can trust your data, you know the results you're getting from your data are correct, you can start making business decisions and predict future outcomes. So what can we do with high quality data? So just kind of some quick examples. We can maybe predict how many states our customer leads live in. So that could be really beneficial to know, hey, is there a state that we're just really getting a lot of leads from? And then with that information, maybe business leaders can say, well, what's different about that state? Why are we getting more leads in that state versus this state? And they can start to ask those questions. Versus if they didn't have that data, they would just be blindly guessing, oh, well, maybe Texas is higher. And then they try to use that as the baseline, but maybe Texas is the lowest leads. And then they're kind of basing their decisions off of bad data. We can also maybe predict how many loans default within the first year. So maybe kind of seeing, why do these loans go in default? Is it because they just have too much debt and they just can't make their mortgage payment? Or maybe they're in a unique position where they got hit by a hurricane and that caused them to have financial difficulties. Getting all of this data just helps drive business decisions. We could also help walk a customer through the entire life cycle, from lead to having the loan paid off. This is extremely valuable for a customer too, or for a company too, because if you have that holistic view of your customer, you can really see what's going on. How can you, maybe a loan that was extremely profitable for the company, how can we duplicate that onto someone else's loan? Why did this loan pay off way sooner than this loan? And just, again, driving those business decisions. And last but not least, one of my favorites is reducing the cost of returned mail. So this seems like a very simple concept, but every company I've worked with has had trouble with returned mail. We get hundreds and thousands and millions of pieces of mail back because we didn't have the address correct on the envelope. And it's something that seems so simple that a company should be able to do, but companies really struggle with this. And again, it could be that the customer just wrote 12 Main Street instead of 123 Main Street. It could be something very simple, but things like that add up and really cost a company a lot of money. So again, data governance really helps in driving data decision making. So these are kind of some of the pillars of data governance. We've got policies, guidelines, and standards. So this is kind of the overall, we work with the business to say, hey, what kind of policies do we want to put around our data? Do we want to create guidelines or data entry standard documents? Maybe we notice when we start looking at the data that people are putting in 9999999 for the phone number. Well, maybe we want to create a data entry standard document that says, hey, if you're entering a customer's phone number, don't put 9999999 because that's not a valid phone number. That does the company no good to have that phone number. We have data quality frameworks. So that's kind of our process of how do we catch these errors? How do we catch bad data? And what do we do to fix that data? Then we also have privacy and compliance and security wing. So this is, again, how do we store our data? How do we make sure it's secure so not everybody in the company has access to the social security numbers? How do we make sure when we sell a loan to another company, we don't give more information than what we're legally required to give them? How do we make sure we protect our data just as much as sharing data properly with other companies? And then information architecture. So we work with our data architects and really help them figure out what's the best way to store our data. How do we put it all in our systems to make sure it's the best user-friendly and the most secure? And then reporting and analytics. Again, clean data, what we do to our data really helps drive analytics and making decisions. So I had actually never heard of DAMA before I started working data governance, but it's actually the Data Management Association. And I highly suggest if you're at all interested in data, looking into them because they have certifications you can get. And that, again, will open up a lot of career goals or career doors for you. If you get some of those certifications, you will immediately have that rapport built. So again, data governance is something that there aren't really degrees for it yet. So there are certifications related to the DAMA group where you can, in a sense, get a degree without getting a degree in data governance. So again, there's a bunch of different areas related to data, but the DAMA organization actually classifies data governance as the core of all of these groups. So they really say you can't do data architecture, data quality, metadata. You can't do any of these things without data governance at the core and really keeping all those pieces together. So that one certification I mentioned, one of the most popular is CDMP, Certified Data Management Professional. And that covers really all of those topics on that wheel. Yeah, so just kind of a day in the life of what I kind of do related to data governance. So both organizations I've worked at in data governance, we've kind of followed this general process when it comes to data quality. So data quality, again, is just a small piece of data governance, but it's really that first piece most companies touch because it's the biggest impact to the company and it provides the most value with the shortest amount of time invested. So during data quality, we really look to certify data. So what I mean by certify is saying, hey, data governance has given its stamp of approval. We say you should be able to trust this data, use it for your reporting, that kind of thing. So through that process, we have kind of developed different steps. And like I said, both places I've worked, They were not at all related, but they actually use basically the same process. So I see a lot of companies doing this process, so that's why I kind of wanted to explain it to you guys. So the first part of the process is just naming something. That seems kind of trivial, but you would be surprised how many pieces of data in the company that people cannot agree on for a name. We have something that's called subject property type or property usage type, and you will get two different business groups arguing back and forth of why it should be named one way or the other. So one of the things we like to do is let's just come up with a cohesive name that all the business groups who use this data will want to use and will all agree on. And then that way, anytime in the future somebody is trying to use that piece of data, they know what to search for. Then we also define things. So again, in the mortgage industry, we have different business groups that use different data that nobody really knows what the definition is unless they work in that specific niche of that group. So we put definitions on this field. So again, if anybody in any piece of the business wants to use that field, they know what they're actually using. And then profile. So this is kind of the initial analysis phase. We kind of look at that data field and say, hey, is there a lot of data missing for this? Do we just not have, for instance, our customer's first name filled out for a ton of loans? If so, hey, maybe that's something we need to look into. Or, hey, we noticed that there are a bunch of letters in this phone number field. Why is that? And so we just start doing all this analysis to see what is current state, what does this data field look like, and what opportunities might we have for cleaning this up. Then we meet with our business. And that's when we really, data governance is not the decision makers by any means. We work with the business to say, hey, you have created this data, you own this data. What do you want to place on this data to make sure it's accurate, it's reportable? And so again, they might say, hey, that first name should never be missing. And we go, really? Because I see there's 10,000 examples where it is missing. And then you start having a conversation with them and they go, well, there's this weird scenario where maybe it can be missing. And we build different data quality rules around all of those different conditions. So we really work with the business to figure out what is important to them. There's some things that we collect data on that the business at the end of the day could care less if we actually have correct information in there. They say, yeah, it's cool if we have it, but if we don't, it's not going to change being able to fund this loan. But other things, for instance, social security number, we have to have the correct information in that field. So that's where they would build data quality rules around that to make sure the data in that is accurate. And then from the data quality monitoring, once we run those rules on it, we start reporting that out to the business saying, again, you told us that XYZ needs to be always filled out, but we're finding all these violations. And then we work with them to make sure we get that data corrected. Maybe it's looking at the manual document that the customer filled out, or maybe it's saying, hey, every scenario, this has to be true. We can automate that process to make sure there are system guardrails in place to make sure that value always gets there. And then last but not least, decision making. So again, once we start cleaning up that data, once we get all these rules out there, the business can really start making decisions. So another big piece of the data governance process is collecting metadata. So again, I didn't even know what metadata really was before I started working in this career. So metadata is basically data about data. So one of my favorite examples is using a song, for instance. View a song as one of our data elements. Then within that song, you have all of this other data related to that song name. You have the title of the name. You have who the artist was. You have the album that song was on. You have the genre. You have the year, the track number, producer. You have all of these extra information about that data. And so that's a lot of what we do in data governance is collecting all of that extra information about something that we want to certify. So we compile all of this metadata and make it available for all of our business users. So again, it's just making it more transparent about the data that the company has. So some data quality issues. So these are kind of some of the most common data quality issues. Duplicate data, one of my favorites to catch, because again, you might have customers' information copied in 10,000 different tables. Why do you have that? Why are you storing it so many different places? And maybe they don't agree between the two locations. Maybe we have incomplete information. Maybe we have a phone number that's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, that's not a valid phone number. That's not long enough. We have data inconsistencies. We have inaccurate data. So again, maybe there's somebody's birthday that is just way too far in the past. That is obviously inaccurate data. Invalid data. Maybe we have a field that should only be yes or no, but we have numbers in there. And then data imprecision. So again, maybe we have something that should only be 2 decimal points, but we actually have something stored in there that's 10 decimal points. So here's some examples. So for instance, you could have 2 different tables in your database that in theory should store a lot of the same information. So for instance, this one has the customer's name in 2 different tables. But in one of the tables, the name is John Smith. The other table is J. Smith. So then that's when I start to go as maybe I'm building a report, or maybe I'm doing an audit, and I go, are these actually the same person, or are these 2 different people? I don't know. And I don't know how to make decisions off of this data without being able to know for sure, are they the same person or not? So this would be something where we would want to catch this. If, for instance, they have the same author ID, so that probably clues in that maybe they are the same person, but their names are different. Why are their names different? Then another one, inconsistent. So again, you see this org ID, but they again differ between the 2 tables. I don't know, again, what this means. Maybe I don't even know what an org ID is. That's where, again, data governance could come in and give me a definition of what that stands for. Maybe it's okay that they differ between the 2 people. Again, I don't know, because I don't have that information currently. And then year of birth. Again, you'll see the date of births differ between these 2. So again, this kind of clues to me that maybe this is a different customer, and maybe they should have had a different author ID. I don't know. So, and then last but not least, P_year between the 2 tables. One table has the information, one table does not. If we have the data, why is it not populated in that other table? So this is just some of the examples of things that we would want to catch. And then how would we fix some of these issues? So one of my favorite ways is catching it on the front end. So for instance, in the mortgage industry, when a customer is filling out a loan application, let's make sure that they're putting in the best data possible on the front end. And it can be simple things. You'll probably see this more and more as you're doing things online, is different companies will start to put measures in place to make sure you don't put in bad data. So for instance, on email, it says, please provide a valid email address. Their rule is probably checking to make sure there is the @ sign in that field. And for instance, in this case, they did not have the @ sign, so it's probably flagging to say, hey, this doesn't look like a valid format. Same thing with phone number. I put all 8s there. You'll actually catch a lot of companies do not have this check. I am really surprised with how many online forms I filled out, and I love testing them because I will put all 8s, and almost always it'll accept it. So if you ever are required to put a phone number in for something, but you don't really want to give your phone number, try all 8s. But again, this is a check that maybe this company put in to say, hey, we have people putting in all 8s a bunch of times. Let's make sure they can't do that in the future. Property zip code. This one was too long or too short, depending if it was a zip code of 4 or 5 plus 4. Anyways, this one is obviously not the right format. So again, it tells you to put in a valid zip code. If we had not put that in, it would have stored in our database. We would have tried to mail something, and we would have had returned mail, which cost the company money. And last but not least, states. Again, Some people like to abbreviate states. Some people like to spell it all out. Some people, when they spell it all out, spell it wrong. Mississippi is one of my favorites because people almost always misspell it. So again, a way we can fix that is making a drop-down menu that there's only those selections that they can choose from. And we make sure that we only have the allowable values in our database. So I know that was a lot of information pretty quick, but do you guys have any questions about data governance, about my career journey, about anything? Yes.
How large of a team is effectively needed to work at like your company?
So that's a loaded question. So for mortgage industries in general, they are very cyclical in nature. So we have really high times where we are just closing loans like crazy. We have huge amounts of staffing. And then we have times that we are heading into right now where we are bare bones staffing. And then similarly, there's different sized mortgage companies. So the one I'm at right now is actually the #1 FHA and VA lender in the US versus 21st and Vanderbilt was the #1 manufactured housing lenders. But in general, they were a much smaller scale organization. So just comparing those two, at Clayton, we had a team of about 4, and we could have easily been 10 to 15 plus. My current company, we have, when I got hired in before the slowdown a little bit, we had about 15 plus about 10 offshore. So we use a lot of offshore developers because they are fantastic. I will say it's great. We can send them stuff to develop, and then in the next morning we have it done, and I don't have to code all of that, which saves me a ton of time. But anyways, tangent. But again, our goal is really 30 plus. So again, most organizations right now are kind of testing the waters with data governance. So a lot of them are kind of in that 5 to 15 range. But to truly make the impact we need to, most organizations probably need 30 plus. But good question. Any other questions?
Do you see this as a field that is going to be dominated by third parties, or is this going to be primarily in-house at most places?
So that's actually interesting. So one of the things I've noticed is a lot of the recruiters that have reached out to me have been for kind of consulting type companies. So I think it's kind of split down the road right now. I think some companies are wanting to just hire external data governance teams to come in and do the work, and then other companies are really doing it in-house. So I think right now, again, because it's so new, they're kind of trying it out both ways. I personally think they might start with consultants, but once they realize it's not a quick fix, band-aid, hey, let's clean up our data for a year and then we'll be all sunshines and rainbows, then they'll realize they have to actually open up an internal organization. Because one thing that's, again, super critical is we have to work with all kinds of business units and business groups. So it's not like somebody external who doesn't have any of those connections. They're going to have more of a roadblock versus somebody internal. They already have those relationships built and they know, hey, these are the challenges our compliance auditors are facing, or this is the issues this team is facing, and they know what challenges they're facing, so they know how to fix those issues. And like I said, a lot of companies kind of think it might be a quick fix, but they're starting to realize, hey, there's a lot more involved here, and we're going to have to keep this going for a long time. So, any other questions? It can be anything. So,
Are you guys actively looking for interns now?
So freedom, I would say, is probably not, just because we are in the slowdown. I would say in about a year's time, maybe 2, we'll start picking back up. Freedom in general has a first flyer program, which is geared for recent grads. And we actually had somebody who just completed that rotation, and he actually just got hired onto our team now as a direct hire. But that program, I think is 18 months. And you basically get hired on full time, but you rotate between different departments. So there's like you rotate between data security, data privacy, data management, our ETL group. Like there's all kinds of different groups within tech. Or then there's also one that they rotate between groups in the business. And so that's a really great program. I don't know for sure if they're going to be doing it this next year or not, just because of the market conditions. My gut would be probably no, but they very well may still do it. So I would say if you're at all interested, check it out and see if they do, but I don't want to make any promises either. But if you're a junior, I'd say by the time you graduate, we probably should be good. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
So, I think a lot of times students think, well, I'm a math major. And then when you go online and you do job searches, if you're good math, you don't find as many things as you would think. Although over the years, when I do it, I see it's gotten better.
Right.
So what do our students who are math, I think computer science people know better what to do with those people. They're, oh, you can code, so I'm going to put you in coding.
Right.
What do students need to know about how to communicate to a business that they have valuable skills, even though they took things like abstract algebra or whatever else that, like things that maybe don't feel immediately applicable.
Right.
Like, how do you message that?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing for me was saying I can learn stuff quickly, because that is one of the biggest skill sets I think I learned at Maryville, was being able to pick up stuff quickly. So again, Excel, I didn't have experience prior. SQL, I didn't have experience prior. But all those things, I'm like, I promise you, like within 3-6 months, I will probably be the most experienced person on your team with that software. And I've proved it every single time. So you almost having a little bit of an ego on the front end, but being able to back that up then. Because that is one of the coolest things. And again, getting your foot in the door initially, taking that job that may not sound as fancy, but will give you some of those extra skill sets. Because again, I now can talk to all these people in the mortgage industry because I know it frontwards and backwards, because I worked all of those different positions. It wasn't because I'm fantastic at data. It's because I took that collections. It's because I took customer service. So finding ways to get all those extra skills to add on to your technical skills, and then also realizing like you are really good at picking up new things, and you are really good at learning all those different things. Because I think our degrees really teach you those skills that I thought other people do, and then I get out in the workforce and I'm like, man, these people are really struggling to figure this out. And I didn't realize how much of a privilege we had at Maryville was being able to learn. And that's one thing I think, explaining to employers that, and really your liberal arts. I mean, again, it's kind of, people just kind of gloss over it, but I think that's one of the biggest things that got me forward, is being able to talk in front of people, being able to communicate the technical stuff. And a lot of technical people cannot do that. They really can't. So that'll make you a step above. Do a cover letter. Just putting a cover letter with a technical position, they'll be like, oh, they can write? Perfect. And you would be surprised how many technical people never do the extra effort to put a cover letter, because they're like, well, I've got experience, it's fine. But having that cover letter where you explain those things will make you a step above in the job world. Anything else? Yes.
You mentioned coding, but what type of languages are most used in this type of field?
So with data governance, I would say the most prevalent right now is SQL. But I think some are using Python as well. We work a lot with the heavier developers who use other languages. I'm not super technical, so I don't even know what a lot of the languages they use. But I would say it really depends on the company too. But as a whole, at least in the mortgage space, I've seen SQL or SQL be one of the most popular. And it's super easy to learn. So if you're at all interested, you could teach yourself probably in a month or less, the basics.
So would you say it's fair? I feel like just something you said made me think about this, and you can say no. But would you say it's sort of a fair assessment that when you've been working now approximately 8 years or so, right? And so the progression would seem to me that you went from, putting the collections piece aside, because that's just how they can get people to have to do collections.
Right.
But putting that piece aside, it feels like you were doing very much more hands-on mathy, codey kinds of things earlier, and now you're in a different, does it feel like you're doing less technical stuff now, or not?
Kind of mixed bag. So one reason I'm not doing as much technical right now is because we have a larger team versus when I worked at Clayton in data governance, I had to do all of the things. So that's where it really depends on the organization, because here we're able to hire developers, we're able to hire all these other positions. It kind of takes a lot of that weight off of me. So now it's more, I just need to speak the language, but not actually do it myself. But other organizations that might be smaller, you kind of have to do all the things. So it really depends, I think, on the organization and the size.
Other questions? I know some people like to ask afterwards, so I'm sure Hannah would stay for a couple minutes, but let's all thank her one more time.
I also have my email, and feel free to add me on LinkedIn too, because again, connections will open up doors for you.
Also, we have if you'll connect with me as well, we have a MC Math Computer Science Division group on LinkedIn. I believe you're in it.
I think so. I know I'm on the Facebook one. I don't remember.
But we do have a LinkedIn group with all our math and computer science alums, and periodically I'll post job things in there. Jess Lyle, did you?
Yes.
She works for that same family of companies,
Yes.
and she wanted to post some jobs. So get in on that. Any one of your math professors should know where that is, but they don't all necessarily. Not looking over your classroom.
And I will say, as like internships and stuff start popping up at my company, I'll definitely start notifying.
So get in
again,
those groups, because I'm posting stuff, and our alums hopefully will too.
Yep. Perfect.